You have a love for summoning demons and tossing out curses, but you don't know how to play the Warlock class? I've got your back. Welcome to the Attic Dungeon. My name is Sam, and whether you just want to sell your soul for eternal power or play one of the biggest edgelord classes in the game, I'm here to help you with everything. Before we get into the meat and bones of today's episodes, my true believers, this is of course the moment where I convince you to press the subscribe button if you haven't already, even click the little bell. And if you want to be a magnificent, magnanimous true believer, you would spread the word about my channel to those in your neighborhood that would benefit for it. For yes indeed, spreading the good word that I am spreading myself is the best way to help my channel. No, really, seriously, the best way you can help me to spread everything that I'm doing here is by just linking it to people that actually play D&D and might be interested in this stuff. If you do, many thanks from my part. Now, on with the show. So, Warlock class guide time, finally. Personally, I consider the Warlock one of the hardest classes to build, thanks to the plethora of options provided by your Eldritch invocations. The class also actually requires you to think before you cast, because you have a very low amount of spell slots, but each of your spells can have a very large impact on the game. So what do people expect from Warlocks, except that they're going to be an edgelord? Enough about that. Actually, if you want to play your Warlock in a very different style, roleplay something completely different, I've already done a role-playing guide for Warlock, so be sure to check that one out. What do people expect from Warlocks realistically? You have one of the most potent cantrips in the game, Eldritch Blast. Because you have this low amount of spell slots, you have a cantrip that can do a lot of different things and deal oodles and poodles of damage. So Warlocks usually come across as damage dealers, backed up by a nice amount of control spells, for which you use your spell slots, obviously. Can they do other things? Yes, they can. I've seen a very effective support Warlock at my table, a Celestial Warlock, and I've seen them take the front lines as well, thanks to the Hexblade subclass. So I don't believe there is anything Warlocks cannot do. I'm pretty sure they can fulfill all the roles that there traditionally are, but you have to build for them, and you have to keep your focus when selecting your spells, your subclass, and your Eldritch invocations. The downside to the class, as I said, would be the complexity involved in building. You have so many choices. At level 2 alone already, there are 17 Eldritch invocations to pick from. This makes it rather daunting to new players, as opposed to simpler classes like, I don't know, the fighter, who just has to select a fighting style and which goblin he wants to behead. Same thing as always, I'm going to do this level by level. I'm not going to mention each Eldritch invocation or spell by name. That would make this video about 5 hours long, I think. I'm going to pick out, as per usual, the good spells, the bad spells, if there are any extraordinary good or bad ones. And I'll talk about a few Eldritch invocations when we come to your Pact Boon at level 3. So let's dive straight into this and start with ability scores. As I've talked about 2 weeks ago, ability scores are never a surprise in 5e. You are a Warlock, Charisma is your casting stat, so you want that one to be as high as possible. High Charisma means much more potent spells, and also a chance to be the face of the party. Your social skills are going to be through the roof. Yay for Charisma. And then you want to back that up with Dexterity and Constitution. Dexterity, you are going to wear light armor. Almost all of the Warlocks wear light armor. Hexblades get a medium armor. So the higher your Dexterity, the higher your armor class, your initiative, and your dex save. And then you want Constitution, because Constitution means hit points, so that means not dying. And it also means better concentration saves. And because you will be having so very little spell slots, casting concentration spells is going to be a really popular choice for Warlocks, because these spells tend to drag on and hence have a prolonged impact on the game. I'm not saying a Warlock can't cast Fireball. Oh hell, please go for it. But your concentration spells do outweigh the non-concentrations ones sometimes, because you only have 2 spell slots for the first half of the game. So you want to make those spell slots last. When it comes to proficiencies, the Warlock gets simple weapons and light armor. Nothing too fancy, but you are better off than wizards and sorcerers who don't even get the light armor. Your hit die is a d8. That's solid enough. It's the average box out there with clerics, druids, bards. Again, you beat a few other pure casters, but you can use it. I mean, sometimes you actually want to stay alive, and then a d8 hit die is really not that bad. When it comes to saving throws, you get proficiency in wisdom and charisma. And both of these are actually pretty useful. Wisdom saves, obviously very popular for blocking out mind control spells throughout the entire game, and some other spell effects as well. Some damage, like psychic spells, also tend to deal with wisdom saves, so that's good. And charisma saves at lower level, they're nowhere to be found, to be honest, but at higher level they tend to come into play. Enemies trying to charm you, or enemies trying to banish you. I've said this before, banishing spells almost always target a charisma save, so it's really nice that you can keep your Warlock on this plane of existence and not get banished to, I don't know, some hell you really don't want to be in because your boss lives there, for example. Then we have a look at skill proficiencies. The Warlock is pretty average here. You get to pick 2 skills from a list of 7 skills. There you are, that's your basic Warlock. It's not horrible, it's nothing to go wow at as well, but you know, it gets the thing going. Warlock is one of those subclasses that gets to choose their subclass at level 1. This makes perfect sense from a lore point of view, because you make your pact to gain power. Without the powers given to you by your being that is behind your pact, you're just a powerless noob. This is again something that makes the class a bit more complex as opposed to other classes, because a class like, let's say, let's go back to the fighter or even the barbarian, they get to test out their class before they have to make their subclass choice. So you have a feel for the class before you have to pick what you want to do. And I always consider that to be more new player friendly than, let's say, the sorcerer and the warlock, who have to pick their stuff at level 1 and you only get to know the class afterwards. But it works out and it really fits the warlock thematic here. Yes, of course, our Warlock comes equipped with spellcasting, but it is a very unique way of spellcasting. It is a feature called Pact Magic. It works differently from all the other classes that gain spellcasting. And then I'm not talking about the actual casting of the spells. That's exactly the same. You cast a spell, you check a save, or you roll an attack roll. That's all the same. It's the way your spell slots function. Where a normal caster, and I'm talking about full casters, so cleric, druid, sorcerer, bard, wizard, starts the game with 2 level 1 spell slots, and they reset on long rests. You only get 1 at level 1 spell slot only, and it resets on a short rest. And all your spell slots will always reset on short rest. That's one thing. It's also important to know that you don't gain spell slots at the same tempo as other classes do. You start with 1 on level 1, you do get a second one at level 2, but it takes you all the way up to level 11 to gain a third spell slot, which is really different from wizards, clerics, and what have you. How is this somewhat compensated? Your spell slots are always of the highest level that you could cast a spell at. So your 5th level Warlock has 2 spell slots, but both of them are level 3, and both of them reset on a short rest. Another caster also has 2 level 3 slots at that point, and 4 2s and 4 1s, I believe, but they don't reset except on a long rest. Your most powerful spells reset on a short rest. Also your least powerful spells, because everything gets upcast to level 3. You cannot, if you know, Hellish Rebuke, for example, which is a level 1 spell, it will be cast in a 3rd level spell slot, because all of your slots are always the most powerful there are. The most powerful that your spell slots get, by the way, is level 5. And here you might go, "Oi, Sam, You've been referring to Warlocks as full casters, yet your spell slots only go up to level 5. What's up? Sorry for the horrible accent, but the thing is you do gain access to 6, 7, 8 and 9 spell slots at the same time other classes do, but they're not called spell slots, they're called Mystic Arcanum, and that's basically because wizards, and I think they have a fair point there, didn't want your highest level spells to reset on a short rest as well. Those are tied to another mechanic. So your 1 to 5 spells reset on short rest can be a lot of fun if you have somebody with catnap in the party. Short rest that only takes 10 minutes, boof, you're charged up again, and your higher level spells come at their normal levels, but you only can cast those once per day. Your abysmal spell slots do get compensated somewhat by some cantrips. You learn 2 at level 1, and you get more as you level up at a pretty standard progression rate there. By the way, each time you grab a level in the Warlock class, you can retrain one of your spells, and this is very important for this class. I think, just like for the Sorcerer, I think that's a class where retraining is also super important, but there are going to be some spells that don't scale as well as you might want them to scale when you reach the higher levels of spell slots. And then you can swap those out for any other spell of any level that you know and take that one with you. So again, your spell pool is somewhat limited. It's pretty much the same like a Sorcerer, and your slots are limited, so you want the spells that you do cast to really count. So make sure that the spells that you bring to the table are strong at the level that you can cast them. There are going to be some spells that fall off horribly once you're past level 1, 2, basically. We'll get to that in a bit. Oh yes, the spell list of Warlocks is a bit limited, especially once you get past level 2 spells. It does get compensated because every subclass brings an expanded spell list to the board, and those can be pretty impactful. But since you are a spells known class, you don't automatically gain those spells. I'll illustrate with an example. I'll take the Cleric, who is a spells prepared class. He also gets an expanded spell list from his subclasses. For example, a level 1 Tempest Cleric always has Thunderwave and Fog Cloud prepared, period. He can always cast those spells as long as he has spell slots. Doesn't work that way for a Warlock. Those spells that your subclass gives you are spells you can choose when you level up and you get to select a spell. You don't automatically get those. They just give you more options to pick from, and that is a really important distinction to be made, so please remember that. So let's talk spell selection at level 1, and we're going to start with cantrips, which is the moment where all the Warlock fanboys will shout Eldritch Blast! And yes, we have to talk about Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast is the quintessential Warlock cantrip. It is incredibly powerful, actually. Even at base level, it has a long range of 120, it deals a d10 force damage, which is not easily resisted, and it's an attack roll rather than the creature has to save against it, which has the added advantage of it being able to critical hit. This is not the main reason why the thing is hyped. It is hyped because at level 2, when you start gaining your Eldritch invocations, there are a bunch of invocations that upgrade Eldritch Blast, most notably one allowing you to add your charisma modifier to each of your Eldritch Blast beams, which is really strong because at higher levels you gain more than one shot each time you cast Eldritch Blast. It's a bit like extra attack, basically. You take the attack action and your fighter gets to swing the sword twice. Eldritch Blast works the same at level 5. You shoot the blast and you get to shoot twice. You can shoot at one target, you shoot it at 2 targets, and each of the beams get the charisma buff to damage, which is really strong. And this is one of the reasons why I think 95% of the Warlocks is going to take Eldritch Blast, because they plan on upgrading it through their invocations later on. Now, you have a lot of other damaging cantrips actually. You get Toll the Dead, which is really good as well with its d12 damage die. If you are not planning on upgrading Eldritch Blast, don't feel forced to take Eldritch Blast. I already said it, level 2 you get 17 invocations to choose from. Chances are you don't want to upgrade Eldritch Blast, you want to play some different type of Warlock, or maybe you're a Hexblade and you don't want to be Eldritch Blasting at all for some reason. Quite possible. not a diss at all, then don't take it. There are a lot of other good cantrips on your list, but Eldritch Blast is always going to be the most popular one because of the upgrades and the fact that it can critically hit. And with the fact that you're going to be shooting 2, 3, 4 beams, whatever, at higher levels, you technically have more opportunities to launch critical hits. Of course, the reason that you have this very strong customizable cantrip, as I've said before, is because your spell selection and your spell slots is a bit wah. So Wizards wanted you to have an impactful cantrip that you can use every turn to be efficient on the battlefield while the wizard is flipping through his book deciding on which of his 2,000 spells he's going to cast right now. You get a second cantrip as well. Logic dictates that you take one damaging cantrip, quite possibly Eldritch Blast, but maybe you want to surprise your table and do something different, and one utility cantrip. You have stuff like Minor Illusion, I think you have Prestidigitation as well, so the usual slew of utility cantrips is out there for you to play with. Level 1 spells then, and just like the fanboys will scream Eldritch Blast when you talk about cantrips, they will be shouting Hex when you talk about level 1 spells. Why? Because Hex and Eldritch Blast are the best of friends. What Hex does is very simple. The first function of Hex is a bit like Hunter's Mark, in that each attack that you deal damage with against the target, you get to add a d6 of damage. Which is really cool, because once you shoot multiple beams of Eldritch Blast, you also get to roll multiple instances of Hex damage. So it levels up with your Eldritch Blast, kind of. It also allows you to select one ability score, and the target has disadvantage on ability checks made with that ability score. And Hex just sticks on something, just like Hunter's Mark. It doesn't require any attack or save rolls. You just Hex that guy over there, and now his strength is going to fail him, and I deal a bajillion extra damage to him. By the way, Hex gives disadvantage on ability checks, as I said. That does not include saving throws. It's basically skill checks and the like. Initiative, if you pick dexterity, they're going to have disadvantage on initiative checks, but never on saving throws. But you can see here why Hex and Eldritch Blast are really good friends. Hex is also a concentration spell, so you make good use of your slot. You can move it around once your target has died with a bonus action. You cast it on a bonus action. And if you upcast it with your higher spell slots, Hex will last longer. I think the longest Hex can last is up to 8 hours if you can maintain the concentration, because you're not getting pummeled around by a stone giant or whatever. Which on paper sounds really good, and it does really transform your Warlock into a Gatling gun of Eldritch Blasts. But once you gain access to the higher levels, and you have more spells to choose from, Hex is not going to be your first option every time. It's a great thing to cast and deal some nice Gatling gun Eldritch Blast damage, but you have so many other good spells that are going to outperform Hex at the higher level. So yes, at the low levels, Hex is almost always worth it, and I'd even say keep it with you. If you have it, you might want to cast it on occasions at higher level where that is just going to be your best option instead of summoning some giant demon or whatever. But don't overvalue Hex at the highest levels. Yes, it's cool that you have this bonus d6 on every shot you do the entire day if you cast it at 5th level, but is that really one of the things you want to be using one of your 2 spell slots for? Now, enough about the Hex and Eldritch Blast combination, which you will see a lot being played at the table. You also have other spells. If you want to look at level 1 spells and you want some more damage, I really like Hellish Rebuke. It allows you to deal a rather hefty amount of damage. It's 2d10 at level 1. When somebody is attacking you and they hit, you can respond by blowing him up with 2d10 of fire damage, which can be horribly effective at lower levels. If you want crowd control, you have Cause Fear or potentially Protection from Evil and Good. That can be incredibly strong if you are in the right campaign. It gives a certain amount of creature types like Celestials and Fiends and what have you disadvantage on all the attack rolls versus a target. So if you are in a campaign that is rich with the creature types mentioned in the spell, do really think about picking this one up. It is going to be amazingly strong. As I said, not every Warlock has to be limited to casting Hex and Eldritch Blast all day long. A separate mention I would like to give to Witch Bolt. Witch Bolt is a spell of which a lot of people tell you to avoid it like the plague. And while at higher levels, yes, this is true, I think Witch Bolt has a pretty decent spot in the lowest levels of the campaign. I'm talking level 1 and 2 here. Why? It doesn't scale very well. And that is an understatement. It scales like a dead goldfish. It doesn't. The way Witch Bolt works, let's do that first. It has a 30 feet range. You can attack someone. It's a spell attack roll. If you hit, you deal 1d12 of damage, which is okay. It's lightning damage. And then every subsequent round, you can just deal that d12 again with your action. No attack roll required anymore. And that sounds pretty awesome. There are some downsides though. The target always has to stick within that 30 feet range rather, which is very limited. You have to stick close to your target. It takes up your concentration, obviously. And if you do anything else with your action, aside from recasting the Witch Bolt, you lose the spell. So it's not super, but it has some really good moments at level 1. Again, the fact that it's a spell attack means that it can critical hit. I've seen Witch Bolt critical hit at my table. It is absolutely devastating then to see 2d12 from a level 1 spell and then a d12 for free every subsequent round. Stuff is going to die. But the upcast is really bad. Basically, only the first part of the damage scales. Every spell level, you get an additional d12 on the initial roll, but the free damage, let's call it, afterward always remains a d12. And that is horrible. That is really bad for a spell that requires you to stick close to your target and concentration. So Witch Bolt, if you want, feel very free to pick it level 1, level 2, but retrain it the moment your spell slots are going up to 2nd level, because then it becomes a pile of garbage, really. Yeah, really not a good spell afterwards. So that's Witch Bolt for you. Then we move on to the 2nd level of Warlockery, and we get an extra spell. Yes, not just an extra spell, we also get an extra spell slot. Praise the Lord again, because your 3rd spell slot is not going to be around until 11th level. So love these 2 spell slots like they are your firstborn twin children. You also get the main feature of the Warlock class, in my opinion, the Eldritch Invocations. And as I said, these are the reason why building a Warlock is a bit more difficult than building other classes. You get 2 now from a very long and varied list, and you get to pick more at the levels 5, 7, 9, 12, 15 and 18. And if I'm not mistaken, each time you reach one of those levels, you also get more options, except when you reach level 18. You unlock the full shop of Eldritch Invocations by level 15. At level 18, you just get to pick one more for good measure. Again, long list. I've mentioned it already like twice. 17 invocations to pick from at level 2. 4 of those enhance Eldritch Blast. I said Eldritch Blast, highly customizable cantrip. You get one that deals damage. You get one that makes it 300 feet range, I think. You get one that allows you to push things. You get one that allows you to pull things. Eldritch Blast becomes a Warlock's plaything at that point. As I said, most people are interested in the one that increases damage. It's a good invocation. There's no reason not to pick it. There's a lot of other great options as well, though. Some of the invocations give you an extra spell to cast. And there's mainly 2 types in these. Either there's the ones that give you a spell to cast at will, which means you don't have to spend a spell slot and you don't need components to cast it. Armor of Shadows is an example of this one. It allows you to cast Mage Armor at will. So every 8 hours when you're running out of Mage Armor, you can just recast it and get on with your day. Heck, you could even cast it before you go to sleep, just to make sure that you're armored up in case something would ambush you at night. And then there's the other type of spell gaining Eldritch invocations. Like, I have to look up the name. It's Thief of Five Fates. Yeah, it is. Thief of Five Fates gives you access to the Bane spell. A really Warlocky themed spell, kind of a curse you put upon your enemies, very fun. But this one does require you to spend the spell slot and I do believe the necessary components as well. So those are more like spells you get to add to your list, but Bane arguably is more impactful in a battle than being able to cast Mage Armor. So you have to balance those out. Do you have the spell slots to cast those extra ones, or do you want the free at-will componentless casting of stuff like Mage Armor? I think there's also one for Disguise Self, for example. Also, really fun spell to be able to cast at will without any components and just change your appearances. Other invocations, yes, there's more, obviously, give you a passive ability. Eyes of the Runekeeper, for example, allows you to read all writing, no matter the languages that you know, which is great, actually. I love that one. It can kind of allow you to one-up your dungeon master. Oh, yes, you find ancient scrolls written in Dwarven. Alas, none of you speak Dwarven. Ah, yes, but I can read it anyway. And then your DM's entire plot, which revolves around the party not knowing Dwarven, goes to hell. Another example is Devil's Sight, popular pick. It allows you to see in darkness, just like Dark Vision would, but it also allows you to see in magical darkness, like the one cast with the Darkness spell. A very popular and a bit asocial Warlock move is to pick this thing, cast Darkness on the middle of the battle and be the only one capable of landing any more hits. Huzzah! Now, to be complete, nowadays the Shadow Sorcerer can kind of also gain magical dark vision. So together you can be Team Darkness, just blinding everyone and shooting lasers. Good fun. If you ever feel like an invocation isn't pulling its weight, because as I've said, there's a lot of them and you can experiment a bit with what you want. Every Warlock level that you gain, you can swap out one invocation for another one. So if there's a point in the game where that free Disguise Self that you picked up really isn't necessary anymore, you can swap it out for another invocation, which is really good, and it adds to the customizability of this class. So don't be afraid to pick an invocation that looks cool. Pick it, test out the kit, and if it's not your thing, swap it out for another one at the very next level up. You really won't be lugging around useless class features for that long if you make use of the option. Level 3, there are a few things that happen here. We get our second level spells, which also means, as I said, both our spell slots are now going to be level 2 spell slots, and you get extra spell, of course. You get to pick another spell, because what would the use be of getting a new spell level if you didn't get any spells for that, eh? See what? Yeah, I know. No, you also get your Pact Boon here. You have arrived at a point in your Warlock career where the greater power that you pledged yourself to feels like you deserve a gift. And this gift will take one of 4 forms nowadays. You either can get a tome with extra spells, a familiar, a fancy weapon, or an amulet, a talisman it's called in the book actually. I'll go over each of those, and the base features that they provide at level 3 are very suitable for a level 3 feature. They're not super powerful, they're very good at what they do though, but it's not the type of abilities that change the way you play the game, normally speaking. It's not a subclass feature, you know, it's a class feature, everybody gets access to it if they're a Warlock. But picking a Pact Boon also opens up a series of usually around 4 Eldritch invocations with which you can enhance your Pact Boon, and some of those become very powerful if you choose to focus on them. Now let's start with the Pact of the Tome. It expands, as I said, your casting prowess, the base book. You get a Book of Shadows from your, I don't know, Demon, Celestial, Tentacle Lord, pick what you want. And you can put any 3 cantrips in that book from any spell list. So this transforms your Warlock a bit into a Swiss pocket knife, because your utility will be going through the roof. You could pick up something like Message, which is not on the Warlock spell list but allows for very sneaky and fluent communication between party members. You could pick up whatever. 3 cantrips from any spell list can be a lot of fun. And you can cast those at will, obviously, as long as you have the book. If you lose the book, you can grovel and beg your patron for a replacement. Takes about an hour. No downsides to that. They want to make sure you have easy access to this book, and the DM can just take it away forever, so that's okay. Upgrades. Eldritch Invocation. Upgrades for this thing allows you to use the book as a ritual book. You get 2 ritual spells that you can inscribe in the book, and any ritual spell that you encounter, and I do say any ritual spell, they don't have to be on the Warlock class list, that is not mentioned in the Eldritch Invocation, you can inscribe in your Tome of Shadows ritual book. So if you have a wizard in the party and he has some rituals in his spell book, you could actually very nicely ask the wizard if you could copy those rituals into your spell book. Same with the cleric, the druid, the bard, anyone who has access to rituals and can give them to you in a written form, of course. That is going to be, I think, the condition here. Is going to be able to expand your spellbook. If you find spell scrolls along the way and they are ritual spells, inscribe them in your book before you use the scroll. So it's actually the Swiss pocket knife thing becomes really big with this Eldritch Invocation. There's other things. Oh yes, you can 2 other invocations allow you to write names in the book of people that you either want to protect or there's something else. Oh yeah, you can cast sending on them as well, which kind of makes message useless. But so one invocation allows you to cast sending to get messages across the globe on anyone whose name is in your Tome of Shadows, and the other one allows you to prevent them from going down the first time they would reach 0 hit point, except if they would be outright killed at that point. You don't prevent death, you prevent KO. And the last invocation that you can pick is a funky one. Every pact boon has like this one invocation that just isn't related to the pact boon, but just is really good. It takes away the need for you to sleep ever again. You still need long rests to have the effect of a long rest, so to not be exhausted, I would assume, or to reset your hit die and stuff like that. But you don't need to sleep, and nothing can put you to sleep against your will either. This is really good. Elves have a racial that is pretty similar to this, which takes away the power to put them asleep in any magical way, but you could still sleep drug them if you want to. You cannot sleep drug a Pact of the Tomb Warlock who has taken this invocation. It was part of the very munchkiny coffee log build where your Warlock would just not sleep ever, have a lot of short rests, and thus pretty much combined with Sorcerer, I believe, to get infinite spell slots. That was later fixed with some optional ruling, I believe, in Sanatar's Guide. But still, this allows your Warlock to stand watch for the entire night. You can just spend 8 hours doing light activity. Next up, we have the Pact of the Chain. It gives you the Find Familiar spell as a ritual. So without the book and without you really having ritual casting, you do get this one castable as a ritual, so you don't need to spend a spell slot for it. And on top of the normal options for familiars, you can also summon an imp, a pseudo-dragon, a quasit, or a sprite. And their power and utility is a fair bit above the usual owls, bats, and dogs you can summon with Find Familiar. It is also possible to have the familiar attack by forgoing your own attack. I'm trying to find situations where that would actually be a thing. Haven't found any yet at this point, because the attacks that they have, especially at higher levels, are just really bad. Eldritch Invocations for Pact of the Chain allow you to further enhance your familiar. It's never going to be like a full companion like the Beastmaster companion as it is now post Tasha's, but you can enhance it, give it more utility. Establish a really strong telepathic link with it, which allows you to do more through the familiar. You can dramatically increase any form of healing given to you, by the way. That's the odd one here. It maximizes any healing given to you. So that is actually a really strong one in almost any situation if you have Pact of the Chain. And at high levels, you can even cast Hold Monster at will, so without components and the whole shebang, as long as your target is a Celestial, a Fiend, or an Elemental. which is niche, but the fact that you can cast Hold Monster at will, which is what, a 5th level spell, I think, is, or higher. Is it higher? Can't remember. 5th. I'm doubting between 5th or 7th, really. But still, it's a really strong spell to just to cast at will. Now, the one downside is that once you've cast it on a target, you can't recast it on the target for 24 hours. So once per day, you can lock each demon in hell up in your special Hold Monster spell. We go to Pact of the Blade then. This allows you to conjure any melee weapon in your hand, and you will be proficient with it. Huzzah! You can also make an existing weapon, I think, into your pact weapon. This also allows you to like summon and desummon the weapon. So you store it in some extra dimensional pocket, and you can make it appear with a snap of your fingers. You still use the relevant ability scores to attack with that weapon, though. If you make a pact weapon longsword, you still need a decent strength score. So if you are going to use this, chances are, I think the highest that you'll be conjuring finesse weapons. You can't summon ranged weapons yet. That is one of the things that one of the Eldritch Invocations allows you to do. It allows you to conjure a +1 pact weapon, which is also possibly a bow, crossbow, whatever. Another invocation allows you to smite like a paladin does, which is actually a lot of fun. Very limited spell slots, of course, but the fact that resetting on short rest is a thing means you can do the occasional smite. You can use them as your spell focus. That's included in the +1 ranged weapon Eldritch Invocation. Or there's also the option to gain an extra attack feature that isn't called extra attack feature, but it's the same. Or add extra damage to each hit equal to your charisma. Quick side note on Pact of the Blade. If you're not a Hexblade, or you're not multiclassing with the Warlock class, so if you're a pure Warlock that is not a Hexblade, this one is going to be near useless to you. Yeah, your Warlock is not made to be in the thick of battle, so there's really no reason for you to pick up a weapon and do it. Even if you are capable of conjuring a longbow because you picked the Eldritch Invocation and you took the extra attack one, having Eldritch Blast with the one Eldritch Invocation does the same thing, possibly more effective, because it's going to be relying on your charisma, which should be high, instead of your dexterity. This one is actually really good for Hexblades. It reinforces the weapon they can make. More on that in the obvious subclass video, but basically Pact of the Blade is really good for Hexblades to diversify the amount of weapons you can wield and to gain extra attack because they don't get that, and make them stronger. So Pact of the Blade only works when you're a Hexblade, but you don't have to be a Hexblade and pick Pact of the Blade. That's stuff for later. For now, remember, if you're a normal non-Hexblade Warlock and you're not multiclassing, just stay away from Pact of the Blade. It's probably not made for you. The last boon that you can pick is the Pact of the Talisman. This was added in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And the base talisman allows the wearer to add a d4 to any ability check after they know they failed. So that's always really strong if an effect allows you to add a die or dice after you know that you failed. You can do this a number of times equal to your proficiency mod. And like with the book, you can ask your patron for a replacement in case you sold it to a pawn shop or whatever. The cool thing is about the talisman, you don't have to wear it. You could also give it to someone else and they receive the effect. This actually further develops the Warlock as a support. If you had a look at Celestial Warlocks before, they have quite a supporty kit. Add the talisman to that and actually they become a really strong support subclass. Or any Warlock can add some support to the party by taking this talisman and giving it to whoever they need it. Eldritch Invocations, of course, can improve the talisman by allowing you to teleport to the target wherever they are, as long as they're on the same plane. Potentially game breaking if there is some weird travel or the party got split up. Your Warlock got teleported to the other side of the world, but the rogue of the party is wearing your talisman, a snip of the fingers, and you're back with your party. Actually really fun. Another invocation allows you to also add a d4 to saving throws, an equal times again to your proficiency modifier, and it's a separate pool than the one that uses the ability check buff. So you can buff ability checks a number of times equal to your proficiency modifier, and you can buff saving throws a number of times equal to your proficiency modifier. They don't share the same resource pool, even though the resource pools are equally big. And oh yes, the last thing that the talisman can do is deal damage to attackers and push them away. There you go. So pick your packed boon, consider whether or not you want to invest in invocations later on. The good news again is that you can re-pick your packed boon once you reach level 4, which is our next level. So yes, level 4. Of course, the first thing we always get at level 4, 8, 12, 16 and 19 is that ability score improvement or a feat selection. Good stuff, let's not talk about that because no time. And as I said, you also can retrain some things at level 4. You can reselect your packed boon. You can really nicely ask your patron to swap out that Pact of the Blade that you did pick up, even though I told you not to, and swap it out for a Pact of the Tome or Pact of the Talisman, and your patron will happily oblige. He will even allow you to retrain any Eldritch invocations that you might have linked to your Pact Boon into other invocations, because obviously you can't keep the Supreme Healing invocation linked to the Pact of the Chain if you don't have Pact of the Chain anymore. You can also retrain cantrips, and you can retrain your higher level spells. I talked about the fact that your 6, 7, 8, 9 slots work a bit differently. So at your ability score increased levels, you can also retrain those spells starting from level 12, because that will be the first time you actually have one of those. Oh yeah, you also get another spell at this level. Basically, up to 10th level, Warlocks gain a spell each level. It's pretty basic stuff. So also at 5th level, but now you are up to level 3 spells. You can dabble with those with your 2 spell slots that are now level 3. 3rd level spells have a lot of cool concentration spells, which is good. As I've said, concentration spells kind of allow you to make the most of your limited spell slots, and there are some strong spells in this pool, also like Hypnotic Wave and counter spells. So the concentration spells do actually have competition from other spells, but I just like to mention those. So Hypnotic Wave and counter spell if you want to take the control path. If you want good utility, there's Fly and Remove Curse. You cast curses, but you can also remove curses, and some excellent summoning spells, partially thanks to Tasha's Cauldron, which added a lot of really strong summoning spells that are easy to manage on the battlefield as well, because of instead of summoning a horde of imps, you summon one strong demon, which actually does something. So that's good stuff. There are no super strong damaging spells in the base list of the Warlock for 3rd level spells. Your subclass might be able to help you out there if needed. For example, the Fiend Warlocks have access to Fireball at this level, and I think it's the Warlock of the Deep that has some ice. Is it Sleet Storm at level 3? Anyway, he has some ice related damaging spell as well. So if you're looking for the Fireball factor of level 3 spells, you have to look in your subclass whether or not it is offering something. Also, don't forget level 5 means you get an extra Eldritch invocation. Level 6 gives you a spell and a subclass feature. Yay, we move on to level 7, which gives us another invocation. Our 2 slots go to level 4, and again the spells you can choose from are mainly control, utility and stronger summons. If you want damage, there's possibilities here. Look at Blight, a lovely single target nuke which absolutely devastates anything plant-like. Nice side thing, if you cast Blight on anything plant-like, plant-type monsters as well, it deals its full 8d8 damage. If not, you have to roll for it like a normal peasant. Level 8, another spell, another ability score increased, la-di-da. These higher levels are always so much easier to talk about. Level 9, our spell slots reach maximum potential here, we have our 5th level spell slots. 2 of them that reset on a short rest. Be prepared to bump some things back to the Stone Age. On top of that, there's another invocation. Put your total at 6 right now. There's good stuff on the spell list. Again, in the vein of stuff that we have. Utility, control, summons. There is some damage as well here with Wall of Light. A huge wall that actually damages stuff, but that's not its main feature. It also blinds things. And there is Enervation too. And we have to talk about Enervation. It's basically an upgraded Witch Bolt with a life draining feature. So where I said that Witch Bolt doesn't scale very well, they took care of that by creating Enervation. And it's better. It's definitely better. The range is 60 feet instead of 30, so you can actually move around a bit without breaking the spell by your target moving out. And you get half the damage that you deal each round, you get back as hit points as well. So there's that as well. It's kind of, what's it called? Vampiric Touch and Witch Bolt in one spell. But I personally think that the continue in effect still blocking out any other type of action except maintaining this spell is worse at high level than at low level. You have more options by now. You have more spells. Your cantrips have grown in power. And if you cast this spell, you're still stuck recasting this spell every round unless you want to lose it. And thus one of your level 5 spell slots. And that's why I'm not too big of a fan of this spell, even if it is the most damaging spell you have on the base Warlock spell list at this level. If you have some setup, some crowd control to keep the target close, it could work. I mean, test it. Let me know if you've used this spell, how well or how badly it performed. I've never used this one myself, so I don't have any empirical data to compare. Level 10, a new cantrip and a subclass feature. On to the next one. Subclasses are not for today. Level 11, at last. After about 9 levels of bugging your patron, you finally get another spell slot. Huzzah! 3 level 5 spell slots. Now we're talking. Praise your local patron for his infinite power and wisdom. That means, of course, you get another spell as well. And you also gain your first Mystic Arcanum. Remember how at the beginning I explained that your highest level spell slots were tied to a different system because Wizards of the Coast wouldn't like it if Warlocks reset their 6th level and higher spell slots on a short rested. Well, enter Mystic Arcanum. It works pretty much like any spell, really. You basically get a 6th level spell from the Warlock list and you can cast it once per day and you don't need to spend one of your spell slots. So even though this isn't really a spell slot that you gain, it is a spell that doesn't require you to spend one of your 3 spell slots. So it's a theoretical 4th spell slot that can only be used for that one spell that you've selected. Mind you, also, since these spells don't take up spell slots and also don't actually count as a spell that you know, the spells that you're still gaining past, from this level on and onwards, are not your Mystic Arcanum spells. Because you will see if you look at the Warlock table that each time that you gain a new Mystic Arcanum, you also gain a spell known. And that can be a bit confusing, because you might think that the spell that you learn is your Mystic Arcanum spell, but there's actually a bit of Sage's advice that points out that this is not the case. So you're learning a 6th level spell at this point, and you're still learning more level spells, spells from level 1 to 5, whatever you want from your spell list, basically. So you broaden your utility and you gain higher level spell slots. An important thing to remember here. In your list of 6th level spells, I want to draw the attention to the investiture of insert an element here. You have 4, I think it's the basic fire, wind, earth, and ice or water. Because I like these spells, not just what they do, but also the flavor around it. You basically infuse yourself with the element of the spell that you picked, and they are pretty strong, they're pretty flashy, Again, concentration, well, spells with a longer duration, I'm quite sure they're concentration as well. So they're good spells to power up yourself for quite a while and basically come across like you're an all-powerful elemental, but you're not, you're just a warlock that's on fire or whatever. If you want to take your soul game to the next level, because we all know that if you want to play that that original warlock who sells his soul to the devil and whatever, what is better than having some souls for yourself? And that is what Soul Cage is for. Basically, you snatch the soul of a dying humanoid and you put it in a little silver cage. It stays in the cage for up to 8 hours. This spell requires no concentration, by the way. You just put the soul in the cage and that's it. You don't have to focus on it. And as long as it is trapped, you have 4 extra things that you can do. Some are an action, some are a bonus action. It's a mix of combat tricks and utility. Some cool stuff in there actually. And once you've used these features for a total of 6 times or the 8 hours are up, the soul gets released from the cage and can just move on to the afterlife really. But this is, I mean, come on, this spell just screams Warlock, doesn't it? Level 12 is a less spectacular ability score increase and an invocation. Level 13, another spell and your 7th level Mystic Arcanum. Good old classic favorites like Force Cage can be found here. Also Finger of Death, which can give you a permanent zombie minion if you kill a humanoid with the spell. Theoretically, if you have enough downtime, this spell allows you to raise an infinite zombie army as long as you find willing subjects. Because it's the keeping up the zombie is a concentrationless effect. It's an added effect to the spell. And it's a permanent zombie. It doesn't decay after 8 hours or whatever. So if you shoot a random human every day with Finger of Death, you get a zombie each day. Why do I say each day? Because your Arcanum resets every day, basically. So in the same downtime that the Paladin has been forging a plate armor, you would have been making an undead army of 30 zombies. Is it super powerful and game breaking? No, because they're the base level zombies, so one tiny fireball and they're all dead. But it's a fun thing to keep in the back of your head that these zombies are permanent and they all obey you. Fun detail there. And I also feel like I should mention Crown of Stars here. The basic idea is that 7 stars float around your head. They illuminate the surrounding. If you have only 3 left, the light becomes dim light. And how do you lose them? Well, as a bonus action, you can shoot one of the stars. And this is a ranged spell attack that deals 4d12 damage. That means you have a potential damage of 28d12 floating around your head. The spell is also concentrationless. I usually say that I don't like the highest level spells that just deal damage. I expect a 7, 8, 9 level spell to change the way an encounter is going or change the way part of the campaign is going, to be honest, because that's how powerful they are. You're also at the highest tier of play. I mean, cool stuff happens. But this 28d12 concentrationless damage that you can shoot out in bits and pieces allows you to avoid things like overkill. You can't lose the spell, and it's a lot of damage, Jesus. So if ever I play at a level where I have a character that this spell is on their spell list, you can be very sure that I will be taking this because this is fun. Level 14 is going to be your last subclass feature. Level 15 gives you another spell, another invocation, now having the full list available to you, and your level 8 Mystic Arcanum is unlocked, of course. There are some niche spells here to pick, like, what's it called, Control Weather, but in the right setting they can be devastating, but there's also some safe picks that are good power plays in most situations, like Feeble Mind, which can make anyone's brain go flip in an instant, which is always good fun. Level 16, ability scoring increase onward. Level 17, a spell known and, believe it or not, oh my god, it's impossible, Your 4th spell slot has arrived. You now have the full set of 4 level 5 spell slots that reset on a short rest. To make matters even better, you also get your 9th level Mystic Arcanum. Pick something fun, it's all good stuff. At this point, you're breaking the game most likely. Level 18 gives you your last invocation, 19 is the last ability score increase, and 20 gives you Eldritch Master, which in my opinion is actually one of the better level 20 capstones out there. Once per long rest, you can spend a minute again begging and groveling to your patron to return all of your spell slots at once. Situational, but really great if you have a series of battles which require a lot of spell casting and flashy things. You basically have 8 level 5 spell slots at your discretion as long as you have 1 minute of rest in between. And if after those 2 battles you're still empty, you can just take a long rest of an hour and again have 4 level 5 spell slots at your discretion to use. So hey, Warlocks resetting on short amounts of time is really gaining more value here. And we're done! Yes, well, as expected, the Warlock video was very long. Don't hesitate to leave a like, talk about the Warlocks that you've played, or tell me how awesome my videos are. And if all goes well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you next time in the Attic Dungeon!